everyone, and welcome to TMACC's annual fall legislative breakfast. So who has tea time after this? Or their bicycle on the back of their car ready to go for a ride on the Chester Valley Trail? It's a beautiful day that's out there. If I could ask all to rise at this time to pledge allegiance to the flag in a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. So when we set out to do today's program, we had kind of looked back to see, we've had policymakers in the room talking about what's happening at PennDOT and the federal level. We've had legislators talking about bills that they've been working on. And so our focus today, we wanted to make sure that when we're talking about the transportation policy priorities, that we took a look at the private sector and what that view was and how that really begins many of the legislative processes. And so today we invited 5 different transportation and transportation related corporations, authorities, and nonprofits to discuss their legislative priorities and why they should be important to us and how we can then support those efforts out in the community at large. And presenters today include the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia, Lime, which is the scooter portion, and they also have a bike share portion to that. PICO, who is doing the infrastructure for diversifying our fuel base so that we have alternative fuels to run electric vehicle and CNG vehicles in the marketplace. And then Septa is with us today to talk about their priorities, since it's a huge investment. Those that were able to attend in the summer, we did a program that focused on Septa's investment in real estate and what that means then to the real estate values that are around. And 18% of my property in the Malvern marketplace does have a residual side to the Septa station there in Malvern, which is extremely important. We also had invited Uber and Lyft to be with us, and initially they were going to join us, and unfortunately other meetings had come up and they won't be with us. And it's unfortunate because they are such a big piece in our local marketplace to have that conversation about where they need to go. We do have several of our state representatives, their staffers with us. We have someone here from Congressman Chrissy Houlihan's office, Representative Carolyn Comita's office, Representative Chris Sappy's office, and then also Representative Melissa Schusterman's office. So we're great that you folks are here. Staffers are an extremely important part of the process. They usually are the ones that have the in-depth knowledge on a particular issue. And they are the ones that bring those priorities and the constituents' concerns to the table. So thank you very much to those individuals that are with us from those offices and your work with us in transportation. I'd also like to recognize Cecile Charlton, who's with us today. She's from our sister TMA down in Delaware County. So thank you very much for being with us. Now, as I always say, we can't do this without our sponsors and their increased investment. Today we have 4 gold sponsors with us, McMahon Associates, Pannoni, Traffic Planning and Design, and WSP. So thank you very much for your commitment at the gold level. Our silver sponsors are Able Brothers Towing, Buckley, Brion, McGuire, Morris, and Remington Vernick with us. So thank you very much for your investments. And then for our bronze level, we do have DVRPC, KCI Technologies, Saul Ewing, Ernst & Lair, TY Lin, and Workspace Property Trust. So again, thank you very much for your commitments to TMACC and transportation. If you would like to learn more about the benefits and sponsorships, we do have things that are out on the table. And if you want more engagement and be a part of the sponsorships that we do here with the organization, please talk to Jonathan or I afterwards. And we can talk about how you can start engaging more of our members and become more involved in the organization. And for those that are considering being members, we do have several non-members with us today. to help support our work and help us secure our TMACC grant funding. Again, please talk to John and myself to be a part of this conversation that we're having with the community on what we're doing with transportation and how we look at congestion mitigation, air qualities from the commuter perspective. As always, it is a pleasure to serve you, the members, through the board of directors. So we do have several of our board members here today. They do come with a range of diversity of transportation and land planning experience. Could those board members please stand to be recognized? Come on, I know you're out there. And finally, I'd like to say thank you to the team. They're the ones that are able to keep my head on my shoulders and not rolling around, and they prevent me from watching all the squirrels outside the windows. And so thank you very much to the TMACC team. They are really dedicated to making sure that your needs and our customer needs are being met throughout the community. They're the ones that are engaged in various different committees throughout the county, whether it be at the municipal level, at a university level, whether it be a regional level, talking about congestion mitigation. What are some of our options? How do we move our workforce around? And how do we create a better environment for all of us in this region? Now, the real reason why you folks are here, as I said, we do have 4 speakers here to discuss their narrative, explaining why it's important and how we can support their initiatives. Joe is with us from Septa. He's here to discuss their narratives to support public transportation in our region. The reason why I use the word narrative in this part of our presentation is that when we talk about public policy and outreach in the community members, if we are not writing our own transportation narrative for Chester County, somebody else will write it for us. And we know better what we need and how to serve and grow our county. So it is our narrative that we are having a conversation on a regular basis. Tom Bonner is with us here from PICO. He's here to discuss clean energy and initiatives that are important in helping diversifying our fueling options. Leonard is with us from the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. Leonard's been a great spokesperson here in Chester County, has been actively involved with the work that we're doing, and they've been a great partner. And then Scott Mullen has made the trek down from the New England area, and he is headed back up to talk about some of the things that Lime is doing. Many of us may know Sherry Shapiro. Sherry was in this role, and she's now in headquarters, and I understand she is working through making sure that all the proposals are well managed and they have the right language in it. And what's really important about this conversation with us having Scott here today is that we know that the legislator is talking about the scooters in the Commonwealth. And how do we manage this and how do we deal with this? I mean, it's a great micro transit option that we do have. And it is, something that my daughter is growing up with, and she tries to get me to participate in that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a great option. And Scott is here to talk about some of the initiatives that Limes has. Each will have a brief presentation, and at the conclusion of the presentation, we'll open the floor for questions. So thank you, everyone. Let me turn this over to Tom, and Tom will start us out.
Good morning. Thanks so much for coming out this morning and giving me the time to speak with you about the work we're doing at PICO to support the electrification of our transportation system. It's something that we see as a great opportunity to not only have cleaner air, to use more of Pennsylvania's resources to meet our transportation needs, and also transition to a system that is lower O&M cost to operate once you get there. Now, it's always a challenge to make a transition as big as moving our transportation needs from motor fuels to electric and other clean energy supplies, largely because we have an infrastructure that was built up over a century to serve motor fuel vehicles. But we do believe the technology change not only is coming, it is here. We've been monitoring this for about 10 years, and we took it very slow for, I would say, the first 5 years of that period. And it was only around the 2016, 2017 timeframe that we really saw the commitment from the automakers, the quality of the vehicles, the improvements in things like the charging station speeds that really convinced us that this is here to stay and something we need to be working with our communities to help forward this transition. So just some quick facts on electric vehicles in Pennsylvania. Since 2016, the number of EVs registered in the state is increasing at a rate about 30% per year. And about one half of those are in the 5 counties of southeastern Pennsylvania, but they are spread throughout the state, probably to a surprising degree. So, too far, there you go. So this is the map of EV concentrations in Pennsylvania. Some of it is not going to be surprising. The darker areas are where you have more higher percentage of vehicles. The one white county apparently does not have a single EV. But, so the highest concentration is in the Philadelphia region and then Pittsburgh, but also the whole swath that goes from the Lehigh Valley through the Lancaster area, some out in Harrisburg. And then you have these kind of surprising places. Center County, probably not surprising, Penn State. Pike County, way up there in the Northeast, which is, we believe, it's largely commuters into North Jersey and the New York area. And then Montour County, which stumps everybody. It's just this like early adopter concentration that seems largely unexplained. I think they have some small colleges up there. But it is, I would describe it as more spread out than sometimes folks that are skeptical of this would expect. There is a perception that we're sometimes battling in Harrisburg that this is a wealthy Philadelphia suburbs issue only. And I think this map shows that's not really the case. One thing, and I think is very important for this audience, is electric transportation goes beyond cars. And this is probably the next big move in the electrification field. Joe works at Septa. We work closely with Septa on their bus electrification project, the largest one on the East Coast of the United States. I'll let him, tell that as part of his narrative. But 25 buses running in revenue service in Philadelphia. I guess you guys are getting 10 more in the near future, and then looking at potentially a large scale transition that has challenges. And the big challenge, and it's going to be the challenge for anyone who's looking to move to electrification, is the infrastructure and charging needs. The places where people keep vehicles typically are not currently configured for large electric loads. And that's where we at PICO want to be the partner and we call it the proactive enabler to help make projects happen, because this is not simple and it's going to take a rethinking of how vehicles are stored and fueled. The Port of Philadelphia is more than halfway through moving entirely to electric cranes. This is essential to their strategy to remain relevant on a global stage as a internationally competitive port. The electric cranes are far cheaper to operate. They are cleaner for the neighborhoods they're adjacent to, but most importantly, they are large enough that they can reach to both sides of a large ship. You probably don't know this, but the old diesel cranes, a ship would have to come in and all the cargo would have to be loaded specifically for Philadelphia on one side of the ship. It would be taken off the ship. The ship would go back out into the river and come back in to unload the other side of the cargo. They are replacing all of those cranes, and it's a huge part of their strategy to remain internationally competitive. Refuse trucks, great opportunity for electrification. And we have been having a lot of conversations with folks like UPS that if you drive, the basic formula here is if you drive a lot of miles in a controlled range, and the range is getting better with every passing year, that electrification is a great opportunity for you. It's also, and I know we're going to hear from the gentleman from Lime in a few moments, when you're operating in neighborhoods, and we're not just talking about neighborhoods in the city of Philadelphia. It could be a neighborhood like the town of Westchester or Downingtown or Phoenixville, and you have vehicles that are operating in fairly dense urbanized environments. the clean air benefits that electrification can provide are huge. So we talked about those benefits. Number one, 5.6 million Pennsylvanians live in counties that are in Clean Air Act non-attainment. Electric vehicles essentially eliminate all ground level emissions, 100%. And on the hottest summer day, needless to say, they also eliminate or reduce that urban heat island effect that can result in urban neighborhoods being 20 degrees warmer than the surrounding areas. So you're totally eliminating that and getting, we all know the importance of Clean Air Act compliance and the restrictions that places on economic development. You can move down the road there. Number two, 100% or virtually 100% of electricity used in Pennsylvania comes from Pennsylvania. We're actually a huge net exporter of electricity versus importing, foreign fuel sources for liquid fuels for gasoline and diesel. And then finally, for carbon emissions, you are, according to the US DOE, it's about 67% lower carbon emissions to run an electric vehicle than a conventional vehicle. So, if you care about, carbon, this is really low-hanging fruit. It's a complex transition, but it's one that, over time, once you make the investment, it makes sense and it makes the environment better at the same time. So we're interested in it for all those reasons. And I always like to be full disclosure. We're also in the business of making money by transmitting electricity and delivering electricity. Full disclosure, yeah. I once said to a congressional staffer who accused me of when I came in and pitched on a different issue, and she said, well, that may all be true, but it's also in your self-interest. I stepped back for a second. I said, wait a minute. If I'm doing my job well, every word that comes out of my mouth should be both true and in my self-interest. So adoption is growing, but challenges remain. Adoption, as I said earlier, is growing by 30% a year. In terms of the vehicles, there are now more than 50 models available. Since I did this slide, there's been huge improvements in these trucks and heavier duty vehicles that a year ago when I did the first version of this was just kind of, a promise out on the horizon. Charging speeds are continuing to improve. So when we talk to potential host sites, retailers, a lot of them want to approach the speeds of the gas station experience. I don't know if we can get to 5 minutes. You can mostly fill, you can get a car half filled in 10, and the speeds go down all the time. The challenge is that requires higher electric capacity, which is more expensive infrastructure investment. So that's a challenge, but that's moving. Buses and paratransit are already economic. It is, and from the cost of operation side, it is just the cost of the infrastructure that creates the challenge there as an additional cost of that transition. And then we don't have laws and regulations in place where we can charge special rates to customers to encourage them to charge at lower usage times on our grid. And that needs some clarification at the state. And I'll talk about that in a few moments. On the other hand, there's only about 19,000, probably by now 20,000 EVs in Pennsylvania out of 10 million cars. So we're still at the front end of this. Customer awareness is low, and Pennsylvania does not have the full complement of vehicles offered in our state. For the automakers, some states it's called ZEV, zero emission vehicle standard. They have to sell a certain number of electric cars to meet state law. And obviously that is where they put their marketing focus and send a lot of their vehicles. So that limits our choices. To put in these high capacity chargers, it's an expensive infrastructure investment, and the market takes some time to catch up. So it's really not in terms of going someplace to charge. It's not a commercially viable investment yet. And but without the chargers, people are hesitant to get the vehicles. So there's a chicken and I like to say a chicken and her egg challenge here. We always say chicken and egg, and I don't know of any male chickens that lay eggs. So it's really a chicken and her egg issue. Talked about the internet connection costs and the need for clearer regulations. So what can we as PECO, what are we doing to support electrification? Number one, we're trying to work with the customer. We call ourselves a proactive enabler for complex projects. If any of you are looking at this, I've already talked to one person here who is at an electrification project. Please let us know. We will work with you. We do not sit there and wait for you to have everything fleshed out and file a formal service and meter application with us. We have a team on our distributed energy resources group that will look through options with you, let you know if I put it in here, it may be really expensive, but if I put it in down the road or the other side of the parking lot, the interconnection is going to be a lot cheaper. If you are a business that has multiple locations, one business may be on a circuit that would require upgrades and be expensive. Another may have excess capacity. We'll work with you on that. We have a small rebate for individuals who purchase EVs and register them with us. It's $50. It's not going to change the world, but it lets us know, where this is coming on the system and track any reliability impacts. And more importantly, it creates a relationship with our EV driver customers. For the institutional side, we also work and will assist you in making applications for state incentives, either under the VW settlement program or the Pennsylvania Alternative Fuel Infrastructure Grant Program. And we have anyone who's looking to put in level 2 charging stations, which is the chargers you can put curbside or in a parking lot, charge a vehicle in about 2 hours. There is a state grant program for that under VW. We provide a supplemental $500 incentive on that will, in most cases, pay for like 3 years of the electric cost of putting in that charger. You can use it for whatever you want other than the actual covered parts of the program under the state grant, because they would discount that against you. And then we do education and promotion events. In terms of projects, we are walking the walk on this, integrated these EVs into our fleet in about 4 different categories, and we have workplace charging available at Pico, not enough. And we're also looking to partner with people on technology pilots. And then the last 2 things are policies, which is primarily what I work on. We offer a discounted rate on the demand charges for fast chargers, which are those kind of corridor EV chargers that people, if you're out on the road traveling, might need to use. And then the other thing we have helped work with Senator Bob Mensch of Berks County and a little bit of Montgomery County on legislation to enable us to sponsor regional infrastructure analysis plans and then submit plans to the PUC for investments to support electrification. I'll talk about the details of that in a moment. So talk about, I think, most of these things, really the 4 key factors, and this is all a fast-changing technology environment: vehicles, charging equipment, market conditions, and customer preferences, and public policy. All these things are moving at very rapid rates. Vehicles and charging equipment is probably on a 3-4 year cycle, where what you have today in 3-4 years is really, I don't want to say obsolete, but it is the last generation of technology. So you're trying to plan public policy around something that's moving this fast. I know my friends in the tech industry will say that's not fast. 12 to 18 months is fast. But for us in the utility world and transportation world, that's fast. So what could a regional infrastructure look like? Downtown corridor and downtown fast chargers, it's a challenge to find places to put in EV charging in not just a Philadelphia, but a Westchester, a Phoenixville, a Downingtown, anywhere where you have kind of a lot of concrete and premium on space. And it's not commercially viable on its own. So you need some partnerships there and some state policy to encourage it. Custom rates and infrastructure cost share for public purpose investments. This would be something like partnering with Septa or the port or agencies like yourselves that are helping deliver a public service and may not have a capital budget, to pay for that up front. Curbside charging in that's available more generally. That's mostly the private markets, but we can assist there and especially make it so you can break ground once by providing some incentives to maybe overbuild today so you can grow into it. And then finally, rates to encourage people to charge when it makes sense to charge. So, like I said, we've worked with Senator Bob Mensch and other members of the legislature on a proposal that would set a state goal to encourage increased electrification. The goal was 50% over the baseline forecast by 2030. There's no magic to that. It's kind of like, baby bear, other numbers felt too big, others felt too small, and everybody kind of agreed 50% felt right of the group that was working on this. It would require utilities to sponsor regional analysis of their regions, hiring independent transportation planning experts to say how much infrastructure is needed and roughly where it should go. We don't do transportation planning for a living. There's not a single employee at PECO that knows anything about transportation planning. We would have to hire, an outside expert. And that's good because that gives you credibility when you go to regulators and say, we want to invest this much money. And it's not all on, your selfish goals or your perceptions. You're bringing in people who do this for a living. And then from that, we would develop the infrastructure plans. It would likely be a combination of incentives, partnerships, and then the possibility of, on a limited scale, some direct investment in charging infrastructure or charging stations just to get the market going. We don't see that as a long-term role, but while utilization is growing the market, we think we could play a valuable interim role there. And then the last thing is electric, because it is a passenger vehicle type application, seems to lend itself to this type of plan. Natural gas, propane vehicles are more fleet type applications. We worked for about 18 months to try to come up with some good recommendations about how we could facilitate and support that market. And we don't have a monopoly on good ideas. We really struggled. The best thing we could end up coming up with to recommend putting in the bill was having the governor convene a task force and make recommendations back to the legislature and the PUC about how we could support those other parts of the clean transportation market. So one thing, I approached him at an event probably about a month and a half ago and talked about this. He invited me to come here. We hope that the TMACC will consider talking to talk to Senator Mensch's office about getting behind Senate Bill 596. The Greater Philadelphia Chamber supports the bill. I just found out yesterday the Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce supports it, and the Grow PA Coalition are all supporters of the bill, along with a coalition of 45 groups that include automakers, utilities, environmental organizations, the transit community, fleet operators, you name it, in a very fractured and contentious political environment. It's really been exciting to be able to bring so many parties together around something that really is trying to help prepare Pennsylvania for opportunities that are not only in the future, but are here today. So thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tim, for inviting Septa and me to be here. Payne McCormick, who is our Director of Legislative Affairs, is in Harrisburg today with the start of the state legislative fall session. There's a meeting of the Keystone Transportation Funding Coalition, and that is sort of our umbrella group that came together before Act 89, all modes of transportation, looking for funding solutions. Thankfully, they've stayed together because we're like that story in Greek mythology, we keep pushing the boulder uphill, waking up the next morning and finding it on the bottom of the hill. So those coalition partners have been very helpful. I did want to mention Megan Curran from our government affairs team is here. I'll be looking to her for a confirmation of my numbers, and if she does this, I know I've done something awful or I'm running late. But the other piece of news is this may be the first Septa presentation that doesn't involve a PowerPoint. And I think you all have participated in Jeff's presentations at a number of different forums. And I think he makes a very compelling case for the investment in transportation and why it's so essential here in this region and across the state and across the country. So as a government affairs person, we're a little bit of a mile wide and inch deep. So I'm going to focus narrowly on our legislative agenda, our legislative priorities, which are going to fuel the things that Jeff always talks about, how we're able to serve this region better, make it more livable, and improve the quality of life here. So just real brief, if I can, on the federal side, we are looking at the expiration of, or the end of the federal fiscal year at the end of this month, the start of fiscal year 2020. We are now looking at a continuing resolution for the start of fiscal year 2020, which is good on one side. It means we aren't going to get a government shutdown. Bad news is, though, for transit agencies and others who rely on federal funding, the sort of intermittent passages of continuing resolutions delay funding and impact how we can execute our capital program. And we anticipate that I think the House is voting on that today, and it will push the budget off until November 21st. The House has already passed their version of an appropriations bill for next year. The numbers look pretty good. A little bit of an increase over the current fiscal year. The Senate subcommittee responsible for the appropriations for transportation just passed their bill on Tuesday. Numbers aren't quite as good as the House, so we're hoping when they make the sausage, we're looking more at the House numbers than at the Senate numbers. All of this is a result of a budget agreement that was reached in August between the administration, the House, and the Senate leadership. It's a 2-year budget agreement, so it's going to set some levels, give us some certainty going forward, at least for this year and next year. But again, we'll see how things work out in November, or if we're following form, it'll be pushed off to January and then March, and we're halfway through the federal fiscal year before the funding is put out. Our priority for appropriations and the things we're working on right now really are trying to maintain the levels that we currently have. 2018 actually was a high water mark for funding for transit. Dipped a little bit in the current fiscal year. Looks like this year is going to be a little bit more like the 2019 levels than 2018. But that's our goal, because when we get to reauthorization, we want that highest number to be the baseline for funding going forward, and that's very important. And reauthorization expires in 375 days. There's a door, or Pam has a sign on her door that has a countdown to all these different expiration dates of all these different funding things. And it's in this really weird Halloween font, I guess, to scare everybody, to make sure that we're paying attention. But going forward with reauthorization, some of the things that we're working for, and in the conversations you're having with your elected officials or stakeholders, would appreciate it, but your support. But I think the biggest thing is trust fund solvency. We continue to have these every 5-year scrambles to get funding for the needs of the transportation network, not just transit. And it just makes for bad policy, and certainty is such an important thing for Septa and for our customers, for contractors we work with. It's just critical. The other is capital investment grant program, which is new starts and core capacity. We have never had Septa's never had a new starts project, but we're getting ready for one. If you know about the King of Prussia Rail project, we're going to be entering the new starts process for that. And we need the project to be not just funded to meet the needs of current programs, but we need it to be able to grow to accept our project. So very, very important. Obviously, state of good repair is very important for Septa. We're an old legacy system. We've got a I guess now it's a $4.6 billion state of good repair backlog, thanks to Act 89. But we have to keep that pipeline going. I know Jeff is grade crossings are a very important part of what he's looking for in reauthorization, a grade crossing program that maybe transit agencies or commuter rails can apply for. And so we'll be pushing for that. And then, since we're not always just looking for funding, we're always seeking ways to make ourselves more efficient, more cost effective, take on innovative programs. So there's the EB5 loan program, which we've been sort of innovative, some on the forefront of using that, and also with advanced refunding revenue bond, our municipal bonds, that was taken out of those were eliminated in the tax bill a couple years ago, and we'd like to see those restored because it gives, again, Septa more flexibility to do the work that they're doing. On the state side, I wrote here, I guess my spell check didn't catch it, but I have the dismal truckers lawsuit, but it's actually dismissal of the truckers lawsuit. The judge, Judge Kane Harrisburg, dismissed it earlier this spring. The Third Circuit Court of Appeals upheld that dismissal. So we've sort of gotten past that existential threat of not having or seeing our capital budget just blown apart by that decision. So it's freed us up to start looking at our funding going forward, working with our state legislators on options going forward. And I think we all know some of the challenges that we have going forward. To that end, last week, Septa and the City of Philadelphia and PIDC hosted about 6 committees from the Pennsylvania House, and it was a great opportunity for us to show how indispensable Septa is to the region. So we took them to Midvale to see our combined heat and power facility there. We took them to a farm stand that's on one of our Septa vehicles or Septa bus routes. We took them up to 30th Street Station where we got a build grant for work that we're going to be doing there. And it was just an opportunity again to say, this region, and luckily it worked out. Our tours happened at rush hour, so we could show them, you ain't getting anywhere unless you're on a Septa vehicle. And I think it hit home, and we think that that's going to be very helpful going forward, those relationships that we were able to create. So with the lawsuit sort of in the rearview mirror, we have two challenges looking at us in the face. One is preserving Act 89 and the investment that it's made possible. We have invested hundreds of millions of dollars in all 5 counties since the passage of Act 89 on projects of real significance. So in Chester County, we've got the Exton Station project. We're wrapping up Paoli. We purchased our new locomotives, which are going to be very instrumental in serving the Paoli-Thorndale line, some of those higher ridership, heavy frequency routes. We're in the process of taking or having built our bi-level coaches, which will again be very high ridership and high usage on our Paoli-Thorndale line as well. And then the other piece of that is new funding for investment in transit capacity. So Act 89 was fantastic. It has given us the ability to bring down, I said, our 2013, when Act 89 was passed, our state of good repair budget, our backlog was $5 billion, and we're now looking at a $4.6 billion backlog. So it is a tangible evidence of how that investment is improving Septa and thereby improving the region. But Act 89, as much of a game changer as it was never really intended as a vehicle for increasing transit capacity. It was really a state of good repair program, and it was a lifeline, and we need to preserve that. And going forward, we have some ideas, and I'll touch on those very briefly. But the other is again looking at transit capacity and how do we achieve that. And it's good. Septa is not doing this alone. We're very fortunate to be partners with the Southeast Partnership for Mobility. I don't know if I know Jeff's talked about that. I think when Steve Ray was here, he talked about it. But I encourage you to take a look at pamobilitypartnerships.com, and there are reports there from the Southeast Mobility Partnership and the Southwest Mobility Partnership. And it's a diverse group of business leaders, transportation advocates, transportation stakeholders that came together and looked at, and said transportation's a critical component of our success. And they arrived at a couple of funding options and plans that we feel are achievable, and that's what we're pushing for in the coming legislative sessions. So the first piece is a gradual transition from the turnpike tolls to the vehicle sales and use tax for the Act 89 fund investment. It's scheduled to sunset in July of 2022. The plan is written into Act 89, is for the funding that was coming from the turnpike tolls to come from sales and vehicle sales and use tax. I think everybody agrees that the current formula and funding from the Turnpike is unsustainable. And what we've talked about with legislative leaders is moving up that timeline. Instead of starting at the 11th hour in 2022, beginning that process, be it, if it's $100 million the first year, $100 million the next, what have you, but not waiting till midnight on July or on June 30th, 2022 to make those decisions. It's a more gradual budget impact, and we think it makes a lot of sense. And there's a lot of support from it, again, from the Mobility Partnership and others. In the spring term, legislation was introduced in the Senate to do just that, and we're hoping again to see something like that in the House and work toward that either this fall or as the next budget year approaches. And then, for increasing transit capacity and for finding that next bit of money that funding that can allow us to serve the region and put those projects into place that are going to make us be able to serve not just our current riders, but the growth that we're seeing all throughout the region. Looking at opportunities to give local municipalities or local localities the ability, if they decide, to generate their own revenue for projects of significance. And Septa has 4 very significant projects that we're targeting for investment over the next 20 years. And I mentioned the King of Prussia Rail project, and that would provide rail service to the 3rd largest employment district center in the region. The other is our regional rail capacity, which would be to replace our 1974 through 1977 Silverliner 4 cars, which are some of the oldest in the country. The other would be to expand our Market Frankfurt line platforms so we could have 8-car trains. Because if you look at all the maps and you've seen Jeff's presentations, all the development in the city, or not all of it, but the vast majority is happening along our Market Frankfurt line and our Broad Street line. And to keep up with that capacity, we're going to need to invest. And the last is our trolley modernization program. Right now, we have one of the greatest trolley fleet networks in the country. It's fantastic. It's almost entirely 100% inaccessible for anybody with a disability. So we need to bring that up to modern standards. And then we're looking at ways to add a second car to each trolley so we can add capacity, run longer trolleys, articulated trolleys with one operator. So we're maximizing ridership, keeping our costs low. So those are real critical activities that we have. And we're going to be pushing, again, those opportunities in the next couple of months to find innovative ways to fund these projects, because they are absolutely critical to our region. So, why do we have this agenda? And I think I sort of answered it, but it's all those things that we talk about. Septa driving the economy, Septa promoting safety, Septa supporting equity for our fares and giving people access to jobs that they might not have, and sustainability. All those areas, we feel like, the engine to all those is going to be, our legislative program. I know this is the title of the forum is private industry, moving legislative issues from the ground up. We're sort of quasi-private, quasi-public, but Jeff always talks about having, being a public sector entity with private sector results. And I think we've been demonstrating that, since the passage of Act 89 and moving forward. And I'll just close with, a couple of things. One is, our chairman continues to stress that transportation is not a cost, it's an investment in our future. And, mention those 4 projects of significance. And we're able to demonstrate the return that we've had on the projects that we funded with Act 89 so far. And we see a real opportunity to meet the needs of the region with those 4 projects. We have a gem here in southeastern Pennsylvania with Septa. I think Seattle's going to invest about $54 billion in their transit network for something that's about a quarter of the size of ours. So we're looking at very targeted investments in Septa system to be able to grow for the, right now and for the next 20 years. And then I'll just close again just with a nod to our Paoli Station ribbon cutting. We have that coming up on Monday. That's our joint project with Amtrak, and that's to make Paoli Station one of the highest ridership suburban stations in our network, and certainly on Amtrak's network, fully ADA accessible. And that's the first step in a three-pronged project. The next step will be a new bridge over the tracks. We'll get rid of the Valley Road Bridge, which is if anybody's driven on it or tried to walk there, it's a little bit of a hairy situation. So that'll be the next step, and then followed by hopefully a parking garage and some mixed use there in the lot. And then Exton Station, which is another joint project that we have with Amtrak. We anticipate we'll be finishing that up November or December, and we're looking forward to having the ribbon cutting there. So again, thanks so much for having us and supporting Septa's legislative agenda. I think we've got great partners in TMACC. We've got great partners in Chester County. And, I think with a little bit of, putting our shoulder into it, I think we can get a lot of these legislative things passed.
All right, here we go. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah. I'm Leonard Bonarek. I'm the regional planner for the Bicycle Coalition of Greater Philadelphia. I've been in this role for about 2.5 years now. And I am the Bicycle Coalition's first employee that is solely dedicated to working in the 8 suburban counties that surround Philadelphia, and also working on our circuit trails network. We have a pretty active presence as well in Chester County. It's one of our most active volunteer affiliate groups, and Dr. Mike Brenly is here representing that group, as well as the Friends of the Chester Valley Trail. And thank you very much for being here to support me. A lot of folks don't realize we've been around for 47 years, a few more years than I've been alive. There was a long period where this organization was very activist oriented, doing die-ins, for example, to get bike lanes on the Walnut Street Bridge in the 90s. And we more recently have pivoted to working more. There we go. I was just saying, it's like a 90s computer. You just kind of whack this side of it to get it working again. We've had a lot more success as we've grown our membership, and our members, we've been able to activate them in getting priorities passed. Most recently, our 2 most recent gains that we're the most proud of is something that sounds pretty wonky, but it's the PennDOT 5-year paving plan. Has anyone heard of this? So I know every hand that was raised has a familiar face to me. It's my fellow wonks and nerds. We got PennDOT District 6 to make transparent their 5-year paving plan so that when they go to repave, we are ready to suggest improvements for all road users, not just for people that are driving in their cars. Before, we used to find out about these projects as they were being let to different firms and consultants, at which point it was too late to change the design. So getting PennDOT District 6 to make this process, make it transparent, and keep it updated every year was a major win. And once we announced it, we had our sister groups from around the state going, how do I find out where my PennDOT district has their paving plan? And we said, well, they don't have it. It's just in District 6. And that's something that we really worked with PennDOT a lot. We bird dogged them. We followed up with them quite a bit over the last several years to get that done. And that's already showing dividends in terms of more bike lanes being built in the suburbs. We've had a dramatic increase in the last couple of years over what we've had over the last 10 years. So that's been very effective. Also, the speed camera bill, this for the first time will legalize speed cameras in the state of Pennsylvania, and they'll be specifically for Roosevelt Boulevard, which connects North Philadelphia to Bucks County and is the most dangerous roadway in Pennsylvania. And a lot of folks say, well, why are you advocating for this? You don't want bike lanes on Roosevelt Boulevard, do you? And we say, no, well, that one corridor kills an extraordinary number of pedestrians every year. People who are either crossing, who don't have a legal crossing, or people who are actually attempting to cross in a crosswalk and are struck by speeding vehicles. So this legislation will save lives, and we're really proud that this is going through, and this is going to be installed by the Philadelphia Parking Authority in the coming months. We have, as I mentioned before, we have an affiliate group in all 8 of our suburban counties in Pennsylvania and New Jersey, Chester County being probably our most active group. They have monthly meetings. They go to various events. They're working with the borough of Westchester, for example, on a pop-up bike lane project that's coming pretty soon. The projects that we work on, or that I focus a lot of my effort on, is of course the Circuit Trails Network, getting the 334 miles that we have currently built faster and getting to 500 miles of trails by 2025. If we do that, we are on track to meet the DVRPC's long-range goal of getting the circuit completed by 2040. Improving our low-stress connectivity. So recently, DVRPC did an analysis of every roadway in Pennsylvania, and they just added this for New Jersey as well, in southeastern Pennsylvania, that quantifies it by how stressful it is to walk or bike on. And this is a pretty revolutionary way of looking at streets from a very high view to say, where can people walk or bike safely and where can they not? Where are they isolated into islands? So for example, to cite Westchester again, it's the perfect example of a low stress island, a very walkable, bikeable community that is surrounded by highways that make it kind of impossible for cyclists and pedestrians to get to it. We work on bike lanes via the 5-year paving plan. And also because that just covers roads that are PennDOT roads, but there are a lot of municipalities where their most desired project is not on a PennDOT road and they have limited resources for changing their roadway design. So they reach out to us to sort of be the middleman, connecting them to funding, connecting them to consultants and so forth. And our other program is TMACC, and I'll cover that in a moment. And we do a significant amount of data and geospatial analysis with help of some really talented interns that work for us, because I really don't have the capacity to perform this work. So TMACC stands for Technical Assistance for Suburban Circuit Communities. So the circuit is really great. It's our interstate highway system, if you will, for biking. But the highway system is only as good as its collector roads, as its on-ramps and off-ramps that actually connect it to various communities. That's what we're looking to do, is make more people be able to get to the circuit safely and comfortably and in a low-stress way. So more people can actually use that trail network, not just for recreation, but for all the needs in their lives, for work, for taking the kids to school and everything else. So we provide tools to local advocacy groups. The picture on the left is members of the Narberth Cycling Club who are working to develop a low-stress greenway that will connect Narberth and Lower Merion Township to the circuit and to all the amenities in the lower part of Lower Merion Township. On the right, does anyone recognize that image? It's very close to here. Randy?
So it was a valley road with the underneath Amtrak and stuff.
Right, exactly. There's 2 bridges, there's 2 tunnels there. This was recently brought to our attention by the chair of our Bikechester County group. It is pitch black dark in there. There's no lighting. So even in the middle of the daytime, you go in, you are blinded because your eyes are adjusted to bright sun, and the roadway is in terrible repair. So we're working with PennDOT's county maintenance coordinator, Bob Kennedy. And we're also trying to figure out a way to get Amtrak on the phone and to get permission to light the 2 bridges. Because they don't belong to the township and they don't belong to, the tunnels. They don't belong to the township and they don't belong to PennDOT. So it'll be a really complicated process to get permission, but once we get it put in, we can probably install some very low maintenance, low operating cost LED lighting there. That's going to be it seems like a no-brainer project. This could take us 5 years to get completed, just to get the legal permission and get all the liability issues squared away and everything else. So some of I'm going to highlight 2 of our geospatial analysis projects. One is our Circuit Trails Community Impact Analysis. So we looked at the upcoming Circuit Trails projects and wanted to take a step back and look at who are we building trails for and why are we building trails in the priorities that we are. Presently, the priority is the municipalities that have the resources, either financial or planning or staff, are the ones that get the majority of grant funding and get their projects moving forward. Our analysis has showed that those are actually projects where the need is not the highest. The highest need is often in the municipalities that have less resources, that don't have, they might have a staff of 2 and a borough office that's open 3 days a week. That's a lot of the municipalities that I work with. So this analysis gives us a way to look at maybe shifting some of those priorities. It gives us a way to advocate to some of the state funding arms like DCNR to eliminate their match requirements or their match bonus points for grant applications. And then we can sort of help shepherd some of these projects through. The number one project in Chester County by far is the CBT West expansion. That's a very large project. It's over a decade away at this point, but it scored 10 out of a maximum of 12 points on our analysis in terms of connecting the most people and connecting the most people with the highest need in the county to trails. The big kicker is that it will connect to the CBT. The CBT will soon be connected to the Schuylkill River Trail, which means basically from here you can ride all the way into Philadelphia without having to worry about competing with car traffic. So this is going to be a revolutionary project in terms of transportation in Chester County. The other analysis we did, and I could probably do a 45-minute presentation on just this analysis. We had a very talented geospatial fellow that worked with us. She now works for Esri. And she took that level of traffic stress analysis that I talked about from DVRPC and several other data points from DVRPC, including their indicators of potential disadvantage, which is telling you where people who have the highest need for various things live in a given community. She took all that information and we worked with a weighted scale. We had a lot of meetings to talk about it, but basically we took the projects that DVRPC recommended as the best connections to improve the low stress network, and we added the social component to it. And by doing that, it looks at population density and it looks at zero car households and these kind of things that live near projects. That's us, more or less, where we are right now. What you'll notice is that for those familiar with the CBT, it runs pretty much straight across this image. So all of these roads that came up as the top 10% in our analysis in Chester County are actually connecting to the Chester Valley Trail. And that's not a mistake. The Chester Valley Trail is a major transportation, or has the capacity to be a major transportation resource when it's better connected to the surrounding communities. In a lot of cases, people live within sight of the trail, but they have to drive there because there's not a safe way to get to it. So improving a lot of these roadways, while they might be expensive on an individual project basis, it gives us an opportunity to sort of change that discussion around this short segment is actually worth that higher dollars because the number of people that we can connect. This is a map of what that network looks like, that low stress network. Each color represents an island that is fully connected. In the lower right-hand side, you can see Philadelphia has a really robust collection of low stress roads. It has a good street network. But you can also see that Conshohocken and Norristown are the same color because they're all connected via the Schuylkill River Trail. So you can ride all the way from Collegeville down into Philadelphia directly as a transportation resource. And I think a lot of folks don't really realize how well connected they are to the region. As we do some of these projects, we're looking to make this map all one color so that there is at least one way to get on by bicycle from any one place in our region to another. It might not be the most direct way, but it would be a safe and low stress way to do that. When we go showing people what those roads look like, the four categories that the DVRPC has designated are LTS 1 through 4. And LTS 1, this is in Lower Merion Township. You don't need a bike lane. You don't need a sidewalk here. You can send your kids to the neighbor's house down the street, walking in the street in relative security that they're not going to be in danger from car traffic. This is a classic low stress road. It's got curves to it. It's got limited sight lines. It's relatively narrow, so drivers tend to drive slow on it. Also, a lot of these roads have the common factor that they're only connected within a certain community, so they tend to have people driving on them that also live there. And you tend to drive slower when you're driving in your own community than when you're driving through someone else's community. And I think I'm just as guilty of that as anyone else. Anyone who was sitting next to me while my delay is building up on Westchester Pike this morning and I'm late for a meeting that I'm presenting at would have probably noticed that. This is an LTS2 road. It's still pretty calm, but it's a bit straighter. You'll notice they actually put speed bumps in because they had some speeding issues. LTS3, you'll see there's a shoulder there to ride in, but it's a 35 mile an hour speed limit, which means people are probably going somewhere around 50 miles an hour. And you don't have any physical separation from traffic. So this is a higher stress route. And this is Route 130 in Burlington County. This is like a no way, no how. I wouldn't ride this myself, and I'm a pretty confident cycle commuter. So our legislative priorities, our number one legislative priority is Senate Bill 565. This would legalize parking protected bike lanes and pedestrian plazas throughout the state. And it's a weird quirk in the law that basically says that you have to park within 12 inches of the curb, and there's no definition of what the curb is. So we're trying to get the curb thoroughly defined and also say that you can move cars away from the curb to park and create either an expanded sidewalk or a protected bike lane. And this would be the highest quality bike network available, and it would basically give all these municipalities all throughout the state that have PennDOT roads the ability to get parking protected bike lanes on them. This passed the House 200-1. It's very not controversial, but we're having a bit of trouble getting it heard in the Senate. We could have got it heard in last session. They declined to bring it up. So we are looking to do a phone blitz at a time when we see that the Senate Transportation Committee is having meetings to either get them, to push them to hear this bill and get it out of committee and get it to the floor for a vote. And we're looking to our members and our subscribers from all over the region to help us with this. So if you want to be involved and you're not currently on the Bicycle Coalition mailing list, and the general rule is, if you think you're on the Bicycle Coalition mailing list, you're probably not. For example, Brad knows that he is. Adam knows that he is, for example. You can go and subscribe to our list, and you can select the individual things that you're interested in to control how much communication you get from us. But that gets you on our network for these action alerts where we need a push. This is a common sense bill. There's no real reason that it should be opposed. There are one or two senators that are holding it up for reasons that are not really fact-based. So it's pretty challenging for us right now. So we're going to need that help to get this pushed through. So that's go.bicyclecoalition.org/subscribe. Anybody can also talk to me later and I can give them some information. How many people know that only state police can use radar in Pennsylvania? So a lot of folks here already know that. How many other states have the same restriction? I see Nate is correct. You win the prize. It is 0. There are 0 other states in the country that don't allow local law enforcement to use radar. This is another one of these common sense bills that really should be moving through, but there's significant opposition to this. And this is something we're probably going to be working on after we get SB 565 pushed through, because this is just common sense to allow law enforcement the ability to make their communities safer in terms of transportation. The other priority we have is the vulnerable user bill. So the vulnerable user bill will protect everyone that you see in this image, including the driver. So buggy operators, cyclists, pedestrians, and it'll also make a safer environment for drivers by increasing the penalties for striking a vulnerable road user in the road. And this also includes people who operate wheelchairs, someone on a skateboard, anything. So right now, even in an at-fault crash, you get essentially a slap on the wrist for killing someone in the state of Pennsylvania, and we'd like that to be changed. And so that's the sum of what we're working on legislatively, and you can definitely talk to me afterwards for how you can get involved as well. Thank you.
All right. I know we're running a little bit behind time. I'm going to go as quickly as I can. There's a lot of information. This is dockless mobility. I'm going to go through it as quickly as I can, and we'll deal with whatever you want to drill down into in questions. But I do want to start by thanking Tim for even inviting me down here. I really appreciate that. And the group that you've gathered is obviously very, everybody's working on their key functional areas, but we all have to be talking. I was chatting with a couple of the students from Westchester, and I mentioned the idea of a plan-engineer, the thought that planning and engineering should be talking to each other. Right? In the business world, fleet and marketing never really talk to each other. The ops team were the dirty guys, and the marketing were the slick ones that got paid too much, right? Once you break down those silos, you're going to have much better results when we're all sort of pushing towards the same goal. Yeah. And I do want to call out Leonard. You're the only one who has a better belt buckle than me. How'd you do that?
So my name is Scott Mullen. I'm the Director of Expansion for the Northeast for Lime. We're a mobility company. We're based out of San Francisco. We're 2.5 years old. We were formed in January of 2017 to bring dockless mobility to cities in the U.S. Dockless mobility meaning all the technologies on, at the time, bicycles. We were formed as Lime Bike. We have since, within a year, changed our name to Lime as we introduced electric bicycles, and then we introduced electric scooters. We are testing out various modes. What we want to do is capture any trip in a dense urban area that is 4 miles or less, and that's something to the tune of 300 million trips per day in this country. Thank you. And so, who are we? We are an American company. As I mentioned, we're based out of San Francisco. We're privately held. We are VC backed. A lot of people would immediately paint that as evil. We are not, number one. Number two, we have a 5-year vision, right? We want mode shift in American cities. And we're actually a global company now. We're in 100 cities worldwide, 5 continents. We just announced on Monday, I haven't had a chance to update my PowerPoint, 100 million trips. We had our first trip at the end of July on a bicycle in North Carolina in 2017. And so just over 2 years now, we've had 100 million trips worldwide. It took us 5.5 months to get to the first million, which was much faster than Uber and Lyft, which at the time, in December of 2017, we're asking our leadership team, why are you talking about Uber and Lyft? We're a bike company. What's the deal? And the reality is we're a mobility company, right? And we want to bring people more options, bikes, e-bikes, e-scooters. In 2018, we did 28 million trips. And that's with the introduction of e-scooters. It was predominantly on e-scooters that we had those trips, 26 of them. And again, in 2019, here we are, 70 million right now. So this is how you interface with our vehicles. If you don't see one in front of you, you open up your app and it will tell you where the closest one is. You walk to it, you scan the QR code. You've already created an account. It's free to download our app. You've created an account. You can unlock the vehicle, hop on it, go where you're going, park it responsibly, lock it down. The meter stops running. It's $1 to unlock, on average 20 cents per minute to ride. And that's for our e-bikes and our e-scooters. And it's a nickel to ride our standard pedal bikes. And so essentially these vehicles do live in the right of way. And we'll talk about parking in just a minute. But this is it. It's a self-contained ecosystem. It's smart. And what does this compare to? It compares to the dock-based model. And I actually have experience in this space as well. It was the launch GM of the Hubway system in Boston. It's now called Blue Bikes, thanks to Blue Cross Blue Shield, who kicked in some sponsorship dollars to keep it going for 3 more years. This was a success. We launched it in 2011. We were the 3rd city. DC was first. Minneapolis was second. Very, very cold city went before us. We jumped in to the fray in 2011. It took $3.2 million in CMACC funding to purchase the equipment. That's 61 stations. They were $50,000 each. There was sponsorship dollars. There was local match. There was all sorts of grants. This was a publicly funded and publicly owned. The city of Boston purchased the bikes and they purchased these stations and they own them to this day. What we're trying to do is break down that model. We don't believe cities should be buying vehicles. We believe they should be improving the right of way. That's where their resources should be going. And so this was a success. We crossed our fingers, 610 bikes in the first year. We're like 100,000 trips in 12 months. Let's do it. And that was a stretch goal. We hit that in 10.5 weeks. And so this thing went straight up. We proved the bicycle is transportation, dense urban areas, good transit connectivity. People will ride bikes. And, you know, I'm a card-carrying bike advocate back to the 90s in Leonard. I know BCG when it was Delaware Valley, BCDV. Great work. And this is the sort of stuff, not everybody's going to join the group, but some people will ride a bike and some people will hop on a scooter. And that's really what we have to do is take the politics out of this, build better places, provide options. People are going to hop on them and they're going to make better choices. A couple of the limitations. These are like a bus. If you're not near a bus stop, you're not going to use a bus. You're not going to take it if it's going to drop you off a half mile from where you want to go, right? And so these dock-based systems, you pick it up where it is, you drop it, or where the station is, you drop it off where the next station is. If that station is full or empty, you don't have that choice. And so as good as these were as sort of the proving ground, the launch phase for bicycles as transportation, they have proven to be very, very limited. Case in point, Seattle, and actually had the same person who in the city of Boston launched she got the first subway network, up and running. Went to Seattle and did the same thing. 500 bikes, 50 stations. You put it exactly where you would put a very limited resource, near the universities, downtown, places where there is good density and already good transit connectivity, because these things are first, last mile. They don't exist in a vacuum. Typically, people don't take these for joy rides as tourists. Some do, but this is a commuting option. Typically, it's about a mile trip. And the system sort of limped along. It went almost 2 years. It wasn't covering its operating costs. They couldn't expand it. And Scott Kubley at the time was Director of Transportation in Seattle, said, this isn't working, we're shutting it down. But what he didn't say was bikes don't work. And he put his team to the task of writing the very first dockless permit in the United States at this municipal scale. And he permitted 3 operators. Lime was one of them. Another one was a Chinese company that has since exited North America altogether. And the third was another San Francisco company who doesn't do bikes anymore. So the 3 of us came in at 500 each. So they've tripled the capacity of their bike transit network literally overnight, within a couple of months. And the bikes are being ridden. And you'll see here, the small yellow in the Seattle map, the small yellow is the existing footprint of the dock-based system. And the green is the actual footprint of Seattle. And you can see here, it was within a week, we were all ready. Our bikes, because they can go anywhere and they lock to themselves and they have GPS, we know where they are. We can go collect them if they're not being used. These bikes went everywhere, and they were serving places that traditionally were underserved by transit. So this isn't just a connection to and from transit. Sometimes it's the only option in certain neighborhoods. And so this is the power of dockless. So we do want to reimagine urban life. We want to unlock urban life. We ask our the people who took our 100 million trips, why do you ride? And they inevitably come back with words like magic carpet, right? This thing, and especially our e-bikes and our scooters, are like, this thing got me where I was going. I was dressed fine. I wouldn't get on a bike because I would sweat, but I would get on an e-bike or an e-scooter. I've reclaimed time. I can go meet my friend for lunch where it's not worth getting into a TNC like Uber and Lyft, and it's too far to walk. Now I can have a lunch with my friend that I couldn't have had before. $2, $2.50, whatever the trip is on one of our vehicles to get there. So you're reclaiming time and its convenience and its access to opportunity. If you don't have transit in your neighborhood, but you live 3/4 mile from the bus, now you can get to that bus. Now you have other options. This is sort of our footprint. And again, we just announced on Monday 100 million trips. I'm still sort of reeling from that, but we don't stop. We have a thing. I know that, Tom, you'd mentioned the speed of innovation, 3 to 4 year turnaround for capital projects and that sort of stuff. And the tech industry looks at it differently. We have a thing called Lime time, right? It's like dog years, but times 7. Okay. I'm only 25. Just, I had a full head of brown hair 2 years ago. So some of the key facts, and this is different per market. We just did a survey in Boston where we're operating in 15 communities with bicycles and e-bikes. We also have one community that has jumped on the scooter bandwagon. This particular survey was only for the bike riders in Boston. It's actually higher. 25% of our riders in Metro Boston are 47 and above. Our riders tend to be more black and brown, more female by a couple of percentage points, and less affluent than traditional bike share, right? And this is because we're able to go out into places where traditional bike share can't reach just due to cost. 31% of riders in our major urban markets are connecting to transit. And this is why it's so important. We don't exist in a vacuum, and we want to engage with Septa to say our riders are your riders, right? I mean, this is exactly what this is about. People can't make a shift from a car with just one other mode. Well, maybe they can do it with 2. We're working in Metro Boston with the MBTA as our transit system up there, first subway in the country, Green Line. And we're working with them on a dockless mobility pilot program right now because they're interested. They know, Secretary of Transportation Pollock, she knows that our riders are their riders, and that if we're going to make this a viable thing for people to actually shift their mode from automobiles 3 or 4 miles or less, it's going to have to be through a combination. And so we're working closely with them on that to prove out that model. This is key, 34%. And again, this is a sort of company-wide average. These are trips that would have been in a Lyft or an Uber. Okay, now when you think about your choke downtowns, you think about what Uber and Lyft are doing in terms of greenhouse gas circling and idling and all that sort of stuff. This is immediate mode shift. 1/3 will happen the day after cities launch dockless mobility. at scale, right? I'm not talking 50 scooters, I'm talking 500, 5,000, whatever the number is. This is happening everywhere. And just some key stats. Denver did a study. They did a 6-month dockless pilot. A lot of wonks in the room, so I'm going to do some math. I'm confident you'll follow with me. They allowed 2 e-bike providers with 250 bikes each, 500 e-bikes. They allowed 5 scooter providers with 250 scooters each, right? So 500 and 1250. You had a 2.5 scooter bike ratio. The e-bikes in 6 months in Denver were ridden 65,000 times. That's awesome. The scooters were ridden 800,000 times. And so when people say, oh, you guys are pivoting from bikes and you're pushing scooters, this is a poll. I don't know why, right? I don't have 100% clarity into why people will ride these scooters more than an e-bike, but I suspect, and what we've done from surveys, is that people, even an electric bicycle where it's a pedal assist and you're not really going to sweat, it is seen as effort. And getting on a bike, you might be a little bit rumpled and you don't want to get all that. On a scooter, you're just sort of standing up, and we're finding that people feel more comfortable on these types of vehicles to the tune, I'm talking, 6, 8, 10 times more than bicycles. And it's something that has really, again, propelled us to 100 million trips. And this isn't because our team is good, which we are. This isn't because our vision is good, which it is. This is because the demand is there, the nascent demand. People want other options. And I know Philadelphia is number 8 on the list for traffic congestion. Boston is number 1. I mean, how did we beat LA for traffic congestion? We're talking, hundreds of hours of lost productivity, all the associated emissions. Like, something's got to change. And so if we're able to take those 3 and 4 mile trips, anything under that, and get them out of vehicles, it's really, it's high time we did that. So what sets us apart is our approach to smart parking. Clearly, we live in the right of way. Okay, the right of way is 98% built and developed for the movement and storage of motor vehicles, right? And so even if a scooter or a bicycle dockless vehicle is parked properly, meaning that 4 feet of ADA compliance access is still there, we're seeing this is sort of a new thing, right? What we're sort of finding is we don't have operational issues. We hire local teams. We have people out in the field dealing with these things all the time, making sure things are neat. We have cultural issues. I mean, we live in a car culture. It is what it is. And so anything in that context is going to be seen as out of place. But we educate our riders. We direct them how to park, where to park. We've got YouTube videos. We do on-the-ground education campaigns with folks just to make sure that everybody knows what's up. And we've got third-party validators. San Jose State University took it upon themselves, because we have scooters, and we're not the only operators, but we have scooters on the campus and we have scooters in San Jose. And they went out and they did a study. And they found that it was something to the tune of 90% of vehicles were like parked perfectly. 8.5% could have been better, but weren't blocking ADA access. So we're talking about the 1 to 1.5% of dockless vehicles that are technically an issue. And those are the ones that are retweeted 50,000 times. Those are the ones that are picked up by the press. And it seems that is the 98%, when that's actually not the case. But again, this is cultural. Even for me, as a bike advocate and someone in mobility for almost 2 decades now, seeing Seattle, when I first joined this team, I went to Seattle where we had 3,000 bikes. And I was like, my God, they're just everywhere. And that's me, so I get it. I totally get it. And we actively manage those things to make sure. But it's really, we have a scooter pilot in Brookline, Mass, surrounded on 3 sides by Boston. Everybody's watching it very closely. In the midway point, we had a public meeting, and everybody got to come out. Everybody was invited, broad invite list. Whether you like it or don't, please come out and tell us, what's your experience, right? There's a pilot, we want to know. And the town was very interested to know. And everybody in the room, I went up afterwards to the select board. I said, I heard consensus in this room. And they looked at me like I was crazy. What are you talking about? There was like 30 people that said these are the worst things ever, and 25 people saying these are the best things ever. There's no consensus here. And what I heard was, there's no place for these things. And so if you didn't like them, you said, get them out. And if you did like them, you said, we got to build a place for these things. And the town took that upon themselves. They said, okay, because we know where the demand is, and we launched 100 scooters, very, very small fleet, on April 1st. And we're tickling 100,000 trips. And here it is in September. And that's just our company. There's 2 others participating in this pilot. Just the demand is massive. And so they said, we're going to take 1 parking space on either side of the street on every block in the downtown districts, in the business districts. And we're going to create mobility zones, mobility parking zones. So not only our scooters can park there, but they're putting in bike corrals for the casual commuter. They're using the fees that we're paying them for this pilot to pay for police details to manage the bike lanes and the TNCs that are pulling over and just idling in the bike lane, forcing everybody out. So this is the sort of thing where they have taken a very rational and progressive approach to say, we're going to make it better for everybody, even though this is just a scooter pilot. And so we're working with them. That's going to continue through November 15th. And we're thrilled to be participating. Respect the ride. So this is about being the example on the road that you want to see. And this is sort of around road safety. We're changing culture, right? And I know from my own experience riding bicycles in urban areas since the 90s, I will say, I'm not going to say for anybody else, I used to ride like a cowboy because you know what? There were no rules. And I had to do what I thought was safest for me. And everyone would say, wow, you're just a scofflaw cyclist and you're not paying attention. It's like, I'm kind of afraid for my life right now. So I'm not doing this to be a jerk. I'm doing this because this is what's safest in this environment. As infrastructure gets better, it makes it easier for people to be those exemplary folks on the road. And what we did was we called out to our members. We said, we need you to do this and to do it right. And we had 85,000 people sign up in the first 4 days. And this is the Respect the Ride campaign. And they said, we're going to be the ambassadors out in the street. We're going to do this the way it should be done. Even if infrastructure isn't there, we're going to be the examples. We also gave out, as part of Respect the Ride, 250,000 helmets to folks who identified that they needed them. We still do that to this day through our First Ride Academy. A lot of people, I grew up riding bikes. I didn't grow up. My daughter has a scooter. She won't ride a bike. It annoys me. I want her to be on two wheels. She's on a scooter with the two in the front, and is a little ninja on this thing. A lot of kids younger than me grew up riding Razor scooters, right? So they're more comfortable hopping on these things, but not everybody is. And so what we do for that is the First Ride Academy. We come out and we'll do targeted education campaign. We have a robust curriculum that talks about rules of the road, the dynamics of the vehicle, where you should be, where you shouldn't be, how to park. It's a 30-minute class that we've developed with HQ and pushed out to all our markets. And it has an optional 30-minute road ride, actual road conditions. Come on out with us and we're going to show you what it's like to be on the streets. So people who aren't necessarily comfortable doing it on their own, like you don't want to start on Broad Street as your first scooter trip if you've never done it before, right? But you'll do it in the parking lot with us with cones and without the motors on, just to get a feel of the dynamics. And we had one person on our last one, we do these every couple of weeks, say, you know what? I think I'm good. And she didn't go on the road ride with us. And we're like, that's awesome. Thank you for coming out and trying it. I mean, you have to know before you can make that decision. And so we want to have those opportunities for people to try it out in a way that is controlled and comfortable. We do have a dual operations model. We get warehouses wherever we go. We hire local staff to manage the local team. It's mechanics, it's drivers, it's rebalancers, it's street ambassadors, right? So this is job creation. And it's also gig economy job creation, where we have what we call, and I always laugh at this as the marketing team got a hold of it. We have line juicers, right? So if you want to juice for us, you will come into our warehouse. We will give you a quick training. We will give you 4 chargers and our juicer app. And you can actually collect scooters that are near your place, charge them, and then redeploy them in the morning. And you get somewhere $5-6 for that. And what that helps us do is sort of distribute the most mundane part of our operations, which is simply charging the vehicle, because they have to come in to be charged every evening. And it helps us distribute that, puts us more in line with the local communities. They feel more invested in this. Some people are supplementing their income. Some people are supplementing their transportation costs, right, through juicing. But it allows us to sort of turn up the heat a little more if we're allowed. For example, the town of Brookline says, hey, this has been really great. Lime, you can go from 100 scooters to 500. How am I going to 5X increase my team overnight? That's not going to happen. And so it gives us that sort of flexibility that's built in. But, you know, City of Providence, we've been operating in their pilot for a year now. I looked at the numbers yesterday. Over a year, we've contributed $70,000 back into the local economy through the juicer program. That's not small. Lime access. Now, this is the key, right? I just was showing my smartphone, and this is how you get to our vehicles, and you create an account with a credit card. What happens if you don't have a smartphone? What happens if you don't have a credit card? And we sort of built this in 2 years ago, the Lime access program. Just because our bike is in your neighborhood, if it's not accessible to you, then it doesn't help you in any way, right? And so we created the Lime access program to break down those 2 barriers. We can accept cash. We've partnered with the Pay Near Me network, which is 27,000 brick and mortar stores like 7-Eleven, Dollar General, CVS and such, where you can pay your municipal light bill, right? Anything that you need to do as an unbanked person, you can do through Pay Near Me. You can also top off your Lime account. If you don't have a smartphone, you can create an account with us. That is simply your telephone number, create a PIN, text to us. SMS is enough. You can text us the number of the vehicle, which is displayed in multiple places on the vehicle. We will unlock that vehicle for you. When you're done text, we'll lock it down. And so we have to remove these barriers because, again, we're not just serving downtown. This isn't selling ice cream cones by the ballpark to try to make a few bucks. This is about actually bringing sustainable transportation everywhere in the city that needs it. And we're fully committed to sustainability through the Lime Green program. We have committed to making all of our trips carbon neutral, right? And we do that a couple of different ways by purchasing renewable energy credits to support the growth of wind and solar projects, specifically through native energy in the middle of the country. Right now, we're doing the same in France, and we're looking to increase that capacity wherever we operate. It doesn't help that a scooter trip is a light electric trip if the electricity is dirty, right? So we're thinking about this tip to tail. We have to get out ahead of this. And we also purchase carbon offsets. Dockless mobility is about moving and fixing and storing vehicles, and that requires vans and staff. And so we have purchased carbon offsets, certified carbon offsets, to make sure that those are also covered. And here's the rub, right? We came in more than 2 years ago saying, and the data is free. We want the smart planners in the room. We want the folks who are thinking deeply about the region and what the future is going to look like to understand what's happening on their roads. Our scooters, our bikes, our e-bikes are rolling computers. And this is an example of the dashboard that we give for free to cities in which we operate. And I'm really psyched. I just was at a presentation. Boston has the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, about 45 communities coming together. And it's sort of a central resource. They took 250,000 of our trips from last year, a subset of our trips, and did a massively robust analysis of it, including, and Leonard pointed out, the level of traffic stress. That is a key indicator of where people will or will not ride and where infrastructure may need to be prioritized. And we overlaid the trips that we had in a heat map form over those level of traffic stress layer, and we're able to make some really amazing insights. And the best part is MAPC wrote a bike plan for all these communities like 5 years ago. And we've been pushing them like, we got the bikes and we'll bring you the data, like where's the infrastructure? And that's really the skin in the game for cities, is to even just pilot, right? I know concrete and curbing and asphalt, that stuff is on a 2-year construction cycle. It's expensive. We're saying bust out 100 cones from the DPW yard and let's put in a separated facility, right? Like, why don't we have it's not a road diet, but like an open road, Philly open streets, right? We do one up in Boston. We closed Memorial Drive. It's one of the most busy streets on the north side of the Charles River in Cambridge. We close it every Sunday for like 8.5 or 10 hours. We call it 10 hours. And it's all rollerbladers and people grilling and people on bikes and just walking and scooting, having a good time. To reclaim this public space, because again, it's all for the movement and storage of private vehicles right now. We can do better. All right, I think I'm way over time. I tried not to be, but I think I am. So we'll go to questions. But this is the end. We are trying to lead this global revolution. Again, 100 million trips. We believe that 1 billion is not far around the corner. But again, our goal is mode shift, and it's to help cities get in the future. We want to be there with you. Thank you.
So thank you very much for your patience. We are past the magic hour. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to close it down. I know that our speakers will be here for a couple of minutes to answer all the questions that you may have. And Mullen, one of the things that I really like that you talked about is how we can reclaim the streetscape. And always we talk about is how much is that, what is the value of that curb space in our community? And are we underselling it at $1 an hour? So that's a great point that you put out. Before I turn the program over to our board vice chair, Kristen Camp, I just want to point out a couple of events that are coming up. Tomorrow is actually International Parking Day. And within the borough of Westchester, there will be 2 parking spaces made into parklets. So please check out the chambers. The Chamber of Greater Westchester will be doing one at the corner of Gay and High Street. So they'll be out there all day long. And then also down on South Campus or North Campus, but South Church Street, the university and some of the grad students and students will be doing a parklet down there talking about safety and so forth. And so some of the students that are here with us are engaged with that. We do have through the foundation, we have our Moonlight Bike Ride, which is October 11th. Please sign up for that. We are taking over the tarmac at the Chester County Airport, the Brandywine Airport outside of Westchester, and we'll be doing our Moonlight Bike Ride there. As Leonard pointed out, we are actually the lead working with TPD and also Bike Chester County to do the bike lane demonstration on October 19th. So if you'd like to volunteer and be part of that, please see me afterwards or send me an email. On October 23rd, we will be having a networking happy hour event. It's the only time that we will have. That's a social setting for us. So please just stop by, bring all of your coworkers to that event. And then our next breakfast meeting will be on November 14th. We will be over at the Chester Valley Golf Club. We will be discussing 5G and transportation. So while we're there, we do have 3 speakers. One will be talking about the infrastructure and what does 5G mean. The second one is Joe Fiscuso, who is involved with the Smart Cities program. So we're having a discussion about what's happening nationally on that. And then the third is we have a gentleman coming in and talking about the municipal role and how do we want 5G rolled out in our communities and some of the ordinances and zoning issues that we may be faced with. So we can plan this accordingly so that we can adopt with that. And so with that, Kristen, and she's coming up, one last thing, sorry. We are very supportive of, and you will see an article coming out about the census. Why is the census important for transportation? The census actually is the formula for driving dollars to state DOTs comes from the census. Pennsylvania receives $39 billion of money from the feds out of 55 federal speaking programs. Of that, the number 4 program is highway planning and construction, which leads to $1.67 billion. Undercounting of the citizens in the Commonwealth leads to less dollars to the state. And we know how important those dollars are. Kristen, it's all yours.
Thanks, Tim. I know everybody's very, very busy, so we really appreciate you coming out this morning. The speakers were wonderful. It was really diverse topics, but pulled it all together under a common theme. So thank you to Tim for his leadership and his staff for having such interesting topics. We hope to see you at upcoming events, and there's information on how to be sponsors for some of this, because none of this could happen without our wonderful corporate partners and corporate sponsors. So enjoy this beautiful day, and thanks again. Hope to see you soon at some of the events.